Thanks for tuning into this special episode of the Make Space Boring Show. I am Jason Kanigan. This is Ralph Dinsley, aka Dinz. I am the founder of Cold Start Technologies. He is the founder and managing director of NORSS. Thanks for being here, Ralph.
Thank you for connecting with me.
You bet. So, Dinz, the reason that we're talking today is you have an op-ed piece in SpaceWatch.Global that I'm going to link to below, and I want to get your take on it. Let's tease the audience so that they want to go read the thing. What are you saying in this op-ed piece?
The general idea of the topic is basically a call to arms for civil space surveillance and tracking. It's about time that a civil program was researched and developed, and that civil space actually started doing something potentially on the lines of what we do with civil air at the moment, but obviously on a grander scale.
Excellent, and very succinct. So, I know this is a big deal because I'm in space. What about for folks who are on the periphery of interest in space but aren't actually in it? What they're going to say, what's the big deal? What do you mean?
Well, at the moment, there is a limited amount of data we receive on objects in space, because those that track these space objects are predominantly the military, and it's predominantly the US military, and therefore, for right reasons, they don't release all the data that they could, whether it's to do with the systems they utilize or for other political reasons. And so therefore we don't get access to as much data as we can. I can literally step out of my backyard of an evening if it's a nice night and I can watch satellites overfly. But yeah, I keep on getting told data on these satellites is highly classified and therefore we can't look at it. So I believe it's time that civil space took over. So there's more transparency, which will then help us to move towards things like sorting out the debris problem, because that's not a military task. It's like saying the Navy has to clean the oceans at the end of the day. By saying the military has to keep an eye on debris in space. So the more it becomes a civil program, I think the more people will be aware of what the true issues are. And then we can have an open and honest debate globally to keep on top of the problem and potentially sort out management of space for the future.
Okay, so let me see if I get this straight. So hitherto, until now, the managing and tracking of space objects has mostly been done by the military, and that data has been kept secret. Is that the case?
Yeah, I use the phrase the military firewall because they do release some data, they can't release it all. And on top of that, the majority of the systems utilized for tracking objects in space aren't optimized for that, because they're actually missile warning systems. Therefore, they're optimized for looking out for the threat of missiles, not necessarily for the threat of space debris.
Okay, and you have had a long RAF military and space career. You know all about this stuff from the military side, so it's not like you're a civilian looking in with no idea of what goes on here. And so the second part of this seems to be, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's kind of silly to say, look, we need to restrict this data or keep restricting this data. It's not necessary because, as you say, you can look up and actually see the things, and it's time for a change in mentality about it.
Very much so, and hopefully that will help with the debate, and hopefully that will stifle the inevitability of warfare in space debate. The more transparent it is, the less chance there is of a risk of warfare in space. And we see that the risks occur terrestrially all the time because of the withholding of information or subterfuge or whatever else. Of course, it's far easier to do that in space at the moment because not many people have eyes on it. So the more open we are about traffic management in space, the more opportunities we have to utilize it in the future, and more importantly, ensure sustainability of space.
Okay. Dinz, why now? Why not 5 years ago or 5 years from now? Why is now the time to sound the call to open this data up and figure out a standard for exchanging information, having a proper code, for example, or format?
I think more than anything else, it's because of the rapid development of commercial space. The mega constellations, if I'm allowed to use the phrase mega constellations, I know a lot of people cringe at that, but the constellations that are happening on a much grander scale than they have been before. Commercial space is moving a lot faster than anybody else can really keep up with it. and therefore we need some answers to ensure that commercial space can continue expanding the way it's going. Everybody looks back and says, well, you know, it seems to have worked okay in the past, and it has done. I'm not saying the military don't do a good job, but all I'm saying is they get budgets to provide defense and security for nations, and not necessarily to provide a global sustainability support system.
Right. Yes. And it is important, I think, for folks to remember that nation states have their own interests and point of view. And in some cases, they will conceal information, particularly about space junk that they may have, whoopsie, accidentally left up there. And we'll see this stuff in one database, but not another, for example.
Absolutely.
Right so we want to get away from embarrassing anybody, and the format this information is expressed in is not the same all over the world, and so it can be lost in the transmission and that. So we need to get an agreement on what kind of format we're going to be using. What is the next step you would like to see here, Dinz? How do you know you've succeeded with this op-ed piece?
For me personally, and I think I mentioned it when you interviewed me last, is actually a nation like the UK investing money into space surveillance and tracking out with the military programs. And if nations start doing that, instead of relying on old systems and trying to bring them up to spec to support space, actually looking at new ways to do it cost effectively, but to do it openly, then we know that the debate is actually moving in the correct direction. The UK is a great example to bring up right now, because we're just talking about the government investing close to £500 million in the OneWeb bid, and it's been splashed across the UK press at the very least, and also the space press, about this UK government support to OneWeb. Well, for a mere fraction of 500 million, we could actually field a legitimate space surveillance and tracking system that can actually add extreme value to the global requirements and the sustainability of space discussion, and to actually put the UK in a good position to be influential in the future of space traffic management, whatever that might entail.
Right, and that was an excellent thing to bring up, Dinz, is the projected cost of such a system and how low it is in comparison to many of these other programs or potential investments. Is there anything you'd like to cover that we have missed in our quick discussion here?
I think one thing I'd like to point out is right now, because a lot of the data is behind that firewall, there's a lot of projections. I talk about the critical mass of the debris discussion. There's a lot of projections about how space debris is affecting us and how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, and I saw one article just recently that talked about 129 million pieces of debris above 1 centimeter in size that could be quite dangerous. You know, if the more that we have civil programs, the more open the data is, the more we'll actually know which figure is correct. And hopefully it's not the 129 million, and it's more like the 100,000 or so, and we can actually do something about it.
Right, yes. And we should point out again, for the listeners who are not involved in this industry, the Russians will have their database, the Americans will have theirs, for example, and they will often not agree on what is where exactly. And so, yeah, we're just guessing. And it would be great to do with this thing, Cold Star, some machine learning and find out, you know, over time how we could create a better model. So, excellent. Well, I'm going to link to the op-ed piece below. My guest here has been Ralph Dinsley. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers, Jason.